This is Dan of 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗅. Welcome back. In this report, I'd like to describe how to fail at retiring overseas. That may seem like a silly subject, but I think it's important to talk about some of the things that I believe are most likely to cause people to fail at their ability to be happy retiring cheap in a foreign country. And so let's get right at it. Okay, so the first thing, of course, you would fail at is how to pick your new country and home. And the first way people fail at that is they pick a place and make permanent plans to go there, a place where they've never been before. They've read online, they've seen the videos, they've watched and calculated the cost of living from various sources, and they completely prepare and they leave their home country and they land in this new country and go to the area and without ever doing any on-the-ground research first. So my advice about that is don't do that. What you want to do is pick, maybe this is one way to do it, you have your own mind of course, but is maybe pick 4 or 5 places that you think might be the best for you, and then do an exploratory visit to all of them and decide which one's right for you. They may all be in one country, or they may be in 2 or 3 different countries. And that brings up the next things that you could fail at. And that's failing to compare multiple possibilities for yourself. And why is that useful? You know, why is it useful to do this comparison? We've all, a good example is when someone marries the first person they meet. They don't date at all, they don't see the various possibilities they have for a relationship, or they just don't have any experience. They just meet and marry the first person from their childhood or whatever. And you know what? Sometimes that works, and all the power to them. But I don't think it's practical when you're a retirement age or middle-aged person and you're thinking about where to move in the world. I think it's more practical to maybe pick your 4 or 5 top ones and go visit them in what I call an exploratory visit. And so I would recommend going to, this is one way to do it. I do it differently, which I'll talk about later, but would be to at least pick 4 or 5 places, spend a month in each of them, and find out which one's right for you. And so, and then compare them, like food, lodging, expenses, things to do, like what hobbies could you do in that country versus the other country, how would you spend your free time, all of that. So you have really an idea of what it would be like to live in that country as compared to other countries, and what is it about that culture that you like more than other cultures. And you don't really get that in a week visit in each place. You really go spend a month or a few months in each of them, compare them, think about the differences, have factors that you think about are important to you, and whether which of those countries would fill those factors the best. Like in all of my retired cheap reports on 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗅, I tell you what my factors are for picking a retired cheap place. Learn those factors, think about them, and think about which ones you would add to them and which ones you'd take a place you would put in their place that are important to you. You're not me. You won't have the same factors as me, but the idea of thinking about factors is important. Okay, the other place people fail in their comparison is in the cost of living. Once you're on the ground in that place, you need to actually go and look at where you can stay on what you think is an appropriate budget for you. What do the places look like? Are they apartments, houses? How many square feet are they? What do they come with? What don't they include? Are they furnished or not furnished? What restaurants would you eat in, and how many times per week? Would you drive a car there, or would you ride taxis? What do taxis cost? So you have to kind of go through the motions in each place and figure out what it would cost you to live there. And so failing to properly estimate the cost of living in each of the multiple places that you're going to do would be a way to fail at picking your new home country. Because if you don't have the data and you're comparing places without the cost of living data, that's not really helpful to you, and you need to do that on the ground with your numbers. What it costs me to live somewhere, what it costs to another YouTuber to live in another city, that doesn't matter. You have to know what your feet on the ground expenses will be. You can use our data to make decisions about which countries to visit and to understand basic concepts to help narrow down, but you really need your cost of living data, which will come out of a exploratory visit to those countries. Okay, next thing you could fail at is failing to imagine and map your daily life in each of these possible countries. So what does that mean? I got a text from a guy the other day, and he said, or a comment on a YouTube video, and he said, I'm bored out of my mind. I don't know what to do other than to go out and drink and walk around and observe the city. I don't know what to do in this place. And so when you do your exploratory visit, part of what you're doing is imagining what your life's going to be like there. Are you going to go to the gym? Are you going to go to church? Are you going to learn the local language if it's different from your language? Are you going to take dance classes? Are you going to paint? Are you going to write a book? What is your day-to-day life going to look like? And is this a proper place for it to be? Because the first few months you'll just be, kind of getting to know the place, and you need to know, but after that you need to kind of have a daily routine. You have to have it in your mind and think about that daily routine and compare the various places where you could live with that daily routine, or maybe they would vary for each place depending on what that culture is all about. Maybe they're more involved in the arts and dance, or whatever the things you are into. Okay, so the other thing that's important about your exploratory visit, leaving your country for several months in a row and living in various forest countries for a month each possibly, is that you'll be able to pay attention to whether or not you are fit for this sort of living in a foreign country. So one of the ways to fail at picking a new home country, or to fail at living overseas at all, is to fail to acknowledge during your exploratory visit, that's maybe 6 months long, that you are a homebody, or that you're a slow traveler like me. Like, I'm good in a place for a month or two, but after that my feet get itchy. I got to go to a new place, and that's why I like traveling around the world, discovering all the great places to retire cheap and documenting it and sharing it with you, because I'm a slow traveler. There are other people, they're happy moving to one spot and staying there for 9-10 months of the year, and they only want to get out of town for a month or two per year, or a few weeks, or never at all. Maybe they just want to travel in the same country. I'm not one of those people. And there are other people that are homebodies. They really should just stay. And so they may have fantasized about retiring overseas, but when they get out into another country for a month or two, they miss home. They want all of the predictability of home. They want to get back to that same whole food they eat all the time. So that's the other thing, is that by doing the exploratory visit, you find out whether you're a homebody, or someone who can live in a foreign country for long periods of times, or someone more like me that's a slow traveler. Okay, so now you've visited 4 or 5 places for a month each. Personally, I would go back to my top 1 or 2 picks and maybe spend 2 or 3 months in each, because that 3 months in a place is different than 1 month. You really get to understand the routine at that point. Verify your imagined life. Make sure that all makes sense, and that you feel good after a few months. You're ready to stay there 9 or 10 or 12 months of the year. And I would recommend, and then pick one of your top 2 after that. Okay. Now, what's the next stage then? You pick a place, you move there, maybe you go back to your home country for a bit, but then you pick a place and you move there. So what's the next thing that could fail? You could fail at putting down roots after you pick a place. You may have imagined a life, what your daily routine would be like, and you could fail to put down roots in that new place. So what does that entail? You could fail to create your imagined life in this new place. Maybe you won't do all those activities you imagine, those hobbies you would do that you would compare during your exploratory visit. maybe you'll just sit around and relax and read and cook and just hang out at your house, and maybe you'll be okay with that. And maybe eventually you'll get bored and you'll start to execute on some of these ideas. Maybe you're going to start fishing or writing a book or taking dance classes or language or whatever. But if you're not happy at home and you don't execute, then it might, if you don't create this new life and you're not happy just in a very simple life, the fact that you didn't go out and start all, the dance classes, the language, the cooking, or whatever it is about that culture that you found fascinating, if you're not happy just hanging around the house and you don't execute on these or create these hobbies that you imagine in this life, you could fail. You might eventually just get bored and want to go home or what have you. The other way you fail putting down roots is if you try to recreate your old life in the new country. So what does that mean? It means that could be successful too. Maybe you have the budget to go buy all foreign foods and not be willing to live in, and the budget that you wanted in terms of housing. Maybe you'll end up wanting to stay in a very expensive place and keep paying for that budget. But if you imagined a life based on living local and eating local and being a more local type person, and when you get there and try to put down roots, you end up wanting to eat in the expat restaurants all the time and buy all the foreign food that's more expensive and hang around with expats and that sort of thing, and your budget goes out of control. Then failing to live local and instead trying to live your old life in the new country could lead to failure if your budget goes out of whack. So what's another way you could fail? You may have imagined that living local, that you would integrate into that culture. And when you get there and you start to do that, maybe you'll lose interest, right? And you'll show no interest, or you'll lose interest in the culture that you thought that you would be interested in. And, whatever that is, getting involved in all those activities that you thought would be interesting for you. That's fine if you're okay at home and just hanging out and doing other things, maybe playing online or watching a lot of TV or writing a book or just doing whatever it is you enjoy, and that keeps you happy, you'll be fine. But if you plan on all these other things and you just have boredom at home, then showing no interest in that culture that you thought you'd be interested in could be a way that you fail to put down roots in that country that eventually could blow up on you. Okay. Let's talk about the next thing, how to run out of money in your new country. Okay, so you figured out a budget, whatever it is, based on where you live and where you would eat and what your expenses would be. You need to have backup plans for everything. Like, for example, like most of my foreign life, when I looked at what the cost of medical expenses were, and I even experienced them, I decided that I would self-insure with my health care. And so I didn't buy health insurance. It seemed like maybe for 6 or 7 years before I bought my first bout of health insurance. But that was okay because I had the savings and it was more than adequate for whatever came up in my life. And so so I had a backup plan for the few things that happened to me in those 7 years. So you need to have that extra cash with you if you're not going to buy health insurance, for example. And so other backup plans that could go wrong. The place you move into might turn out to have a problem in the neighborhood. It could be too noisy or weird neighbors, or you never know when you move to a new place what it's going to be like to live on the ground there. So you need to have some money set aside to move into a new place. Maybe if you're leaving too early, maybe you need to just surrender your lease deposit, this kind of thing. So you need to have backup plans for what could go wrong. Think about all of those. And you could run out of money if you don't have that backup plan. The other thing is not monitoring your burn rate. A lot of people move to a foreign country and they have an idea what it's going to cost them to live there, And then they just kind of go on autopilot when they get there. They have a pile of money sitting somewhere. They have so much per month they were supposed to spend, but they end up start spending more than that. Why? They've decided they're not going to eat as local as often as they thought. They're not cooking at home as much as they thought. They end up going to these expensive expat bars and restaurants, and they're out drinking every night, and they're watching their savings be depleted, but they're not monitoring their burn rate realistically to see, wow, I'll run out of this faster than I realized if I don't start monitoring this, what my spend rate is, and complying with what my plan was when I picked this country. So you need to monitor your burn rate. Is it, you staying within your pension? Is your savings dropping? And if maybe you intended it for a drop. You have so much money you want it to last so many years, but are you dropping at that rate? You have to keep an eye on that. So monitor your burn rate, because you don't want to run out of money. You want to have choices left if you start to realize that it's costing you more to live in that country. And so maybe one of those other countries that you had as a backup plan, or maybe going back to your country, you don't want to run out of money until you if you're burning money faster than you thought you would because you're unable to live according to what your plan was. So how to fail to surrender or adjust. So if you're not monitoring, or if you are monitoring, but then you just fail to adjust, you fail to go, hey, I'm not going to eat in these expat restaurants 3 times a week anymore. I'm only going to do once. I'm going to learn to cook at home. I'm going to take cooking classes, or I'm going to do this activity over here instead of that activity. I'm going to drink at home with friends, or I'm going to, rather than go to these expat bars, or I'm going to hang out and cook at home with my girlfriend or friend or significant other, rather than being out all the time. You have to. If you fail to adjust, eventually you're gonna lose. And so don't let yourself wallow in denial. You have to monitor what's happening. You had a plan. You came to this country. Don't wallow in denial if things aren't working out like you thought. The sooner that you can become aware of what's not worked the way you thought it would and adjust, the more choices you'll have. And so don't let yourself wallow in that denial. Failing to have new life plans when your backup plans don't work. Okay, this kind of goes back a few steps and says, okay, here's what my plan is. I'm gonna, I've done my exploratory visit. I picked this country, and maybe I have a backup country I pick. So, and maybe you realize that you can stay in. You will be comfortable staying in a country. You've stayed 2-3 months in the 1 or 2 countries you picked after your exploratory visits. But you have to have a kind of a mindset of what is my backup failure plan. So you just don't. You've been there 2 years now and you don't like it. You wish it were different. Are you going to go to another country? And if you are at that point, what's that number that once you get down to there, you have to pull the trigger so that you have enough resources to go to that second country on your list that was a little cheaper than this country, or to go back to your home country? You have to think about what your adjustment is and what your failure plan is. If you fail, if things just don't work out, don't just wallow in it and wait till the end to see what happens. So, okay, finally, don't assume you can live as cheaply as other people, or like I do, or maybe you can live. There's people living way cheaper than me, but just don't assume that. So I have 6 resources that explain why most people will be unable to live as cheaply as we do, and why that is. And so you can take that into accountability. So there's 6 resources on the web page. If you click the link in the notes below this YouTube video, and I'll just name what those resources are for you. So if you're interested, you can come over and click that and read them. You should not retire internationally unless. That's one of my resources. And I talk about a couple of other factors you really need to think about. I won't cover them again here, but next one, why expats should not buy foreign real estate unless. I don't recommend buying foreign real estate, so you want to read that, see why I say that. Why many expats cannot live cheaply. I talk about some of the reasons that people come to a foreign country and they don't live as cheap as they thought they would, or that they need to according to what their resources are. Do not get a retirement visa before your exploratory visit. this kind of goes back up to what I was talking about before. Don't assume that the first place you're going to, you need a retirement visa. You need to before you spend that money and time compiling all the documents they want and handing over money to a foreign government, you need to do your exploratory visit to make sure you picked your favorite country. And also, I have how the cost of living table works. So we have cost of living tables in each of our retired cheap reports that are on Vagabond Buddha, and you need to make sure you understand how the cost of living table works, what it includes and what it doesn't, so make sure to read that resource too and how it works. Now, I don't want to ruin your dreams with negativity. I just want you to try to think about all the backup plans that you need before you act. Okay, to see our retired cheap reports of all these cities, visit vagabondbuddha.com. To get a free copy of my book, How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World for 13 Years, there's a link for that also on the webpage. To learn how I paid for our world travels in 2020, read How I Pay for Things Without Getting a Soul-Sucking Job. That's important because there might be inflation, there will be inflation around the world as you retire, and you need to think about not only what your resources are now, but how to adjust for it. And one of the ways to do that is to think about how to pay for things and ways to earn money in case you need more money later. So, thanks for listening to our post, How to Fail at Retiring Overseas. I'm hoping it'll wake you up so you don't fail. This is Dan of Vagabond Awake, the YouTube channel for vagabondbuddha.com. The world is your home. What time will you be home for dinner? Thanks for listening. This is Dan of Vagabond Awake. Please like this video, comment, or subscribe. Any of that would help our business. We'd sure appreciate it. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching our video. Click the link in the notes below this video to get a copy of this content. Plus, grab a free copy of my ebook, How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World for 13 Years. While you're there, check out our catalog of retired cheap reports all over the world and our hobby income course that we just released. Thanks so much.